Appalachia and the music industry both have their fair share of mystery, superstitions, and urban legends. But this week we are going to Nashville to talk about one of the darkest chapters in country music history. Between 1943 and 1974, 10 country music stars, all with ties to the Grand Ole Opry, would perish. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about the Grand Ole Opry Curse. If you're familiar with country music at all, you have probably at least heard of the Grand Ole Opry. The Grand Ole Opry is a radio broadcast that has happened multiple times a week since the 1920s. And this live broadcast showcases popular performers in country, bluegrass, folk, gospel, and Americana. But over the years, a large number of performers who are associated with the Grand Ole Opry have perished in gruesome and horrific manners. Today, we are going to look at 10 of the cases and talk about the possible origin of the curse. So if that's something that interests you and you're fascinated with Appalachian folklore and history and just weird history and the supernatural in general, thank you for watching and make sure to subscribe. From 1943 to 1974, the Grand Ole Opry broadcast from the Ryman Theater in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, prior to being a theater, the Ryman was built as a church that was called the Union Gospel Tabernacle in 1892. And construction of this church was funded by local riverboat tycoon and businessman Thomas Ryman, which, stop right there. I did not know that riverboat tycoon, I didn't know that just owning a fleet of riverboats was a career. I am now questioning all the job decisions I've made in my life. That is a really cool job. Now, Ryman attended a tent revival in 1885 where he became a devout Christian and pledged to build a great tabernacle so that these tent revivals could happen indoors. And the tabernacle opened in 1892 with a price tag of about $100,000. Adjusted for inflation, that is over $3.5 million in 2024. When Ryman passed away in 1904, the building was named after him. It became the Ryman Theater. And because the church was still in some $20,000 worth of debt when the church opened, the auditorium started being used for all manner of concerts and performances to try and pay off this debt. And almost as soon as the theater started being used for other things besides just a church, it was reported that the ghost of Ryman would stomp around and make noises to try and interrupt some of the performances, especially ones that were deemed a little bit risque. According to one account, there was a performance of an opera called Carmen that had to completely be postponed because the ghost of Ryman was making so much noise. And then in 1943, the Grand Ole Opry started broadcasting from the Ryman. Between the first show at the Ryman and the last in 1974, multiple performers with ties to the Opry would pass away in tragic manners, and today we are going to be talking about 10 of them. On January 1st, 1953, Hank Williams Sr. was found dead in the backseat of a car at a gas station right outside Oak Hill, West Virginia. Many people consider Hank Williams a country music pioneer, most well known for his songs Hey Good Lookin' and Your Cheating Heart. In the previous August, Williams had actually been kicked out of the Grand Ole Opry for his rampant alcohol abuse and missing live shows. Now, Williams wanted to get back into the Opry, so he planned a series of big holiday shows to try and reboot his career and get back in the good graces of the Opry. Williams was supposed to do a New Year's Eve show in Charleston, West Virginia, but because of his health and a severe snowstorm, he was stuck in Knoxville, Tennessee. While at a hotel in Knoxville, Hank Williams' driver would contact his manager and tell him about Hank Williams' deteriorating health. The manager would call for a doctor to come in, and they canceled the Charleston show. The doctor would give him 2 shots of vitamin B12 and 1 of morphine. Now, it's unknown whether or not the doctor knew that this entire road trip Hank Williams had been drinking and taking prescription pain medication. Now, the driver took off through the snow with Hank Williams in the back seat because he still had a New Year's Day show in Canton, Ohio that he hoped to make it to. As the car drove through the snow, it stopped at a gas station outside of Oak Hill, West Virginia shortly after midnight. And when the car stopped, Hank Williams was found unresponsive in the back seat. He'd been dead for so long that rigor mortis had already started setting in. The saddest part of all, Hank Williams Sr. was only 29 years old when he passed away. The official cause of death was ruled as heart failure due to years of rampant alcohol and drug abuse. On March 5th, 1963, a plane would crash in the woods 90 miles outside Nashville in the small town of Camden, Tennessee. And on board that plane were 4 members of the Grand Ole Opry. Country music star Patsy Cline, most well known for her songs Crazy and Walkin' After Midnight, along with Hawkshaw Hawkins, Cowboy Copa, and Randy Hughes. On March 3rd, 1963, Copa, Cline, and Hawkins had performed at a charity show in Kansas City, Missouri. Now, these 3 performers planned on flying back into Nashville on a Piper Comanche piloted by Cline's manager and Copa's son-in-law, Randy Hughes. Randy Hughes was a pretty respected artist in his own right, but had recently transitioned over to the management side of the industry instead of the performing side. Shortly after 6 p.m. Central Time, the plane would fly into a severe thunderstorm and crashed at about 6:29 p.m. The plane would crash nose down and there would be no survivors. After the bodies were removed from the scene of the crash, many scavengers would loot the woods around the site of the crash for anything of value that they could find. And a lot of these artifacts over the years have been donated to the Country Music Hall of Fame. Less than 3 days later, Grand Ole Opry member and member of the Anglin brothers, Jack Anglin, would die in a car crash, but the circumstances around it are insane. That morning, he had attended the memorial service of both Cowboy Copa and Randy Hughes. Then he traveled to the service for Hawkins and wanted to get a fresh haircut and shave before Patsy Cline's funeral service. He ended up spending a little bit too much time at the barber shop and was in a hurry trying to make it to Patsy Cline's service in time and was speeding, lost control of his car, drove it over an embankment into a wooded area, and then he went into the afterlife. His car struck a tree, and he suffered a skull fracture, dying almost instantly. That makes 5 Opry stars dead in a single week. On March 29th, 1963, while performing at the Grand Ole Opry, Curly Fox's home caught on fire. While that is pretty unfortunate, that's not the part that often gets associated with the Grand Ole Opry Curse. See, in his home was his wife, Texas Ruby. Ruby was unable to escape and passed away in the fire. Her official cause of death was smoke inhalation, and that makes 6 Grand Ole Opry stars dead in a single month. On July 31st, 1964, a Beechcraft Debonair, I know nothing about airplanes, aircraft would crash near Brentwood, Tennessee, only about a dozen miles away from Nashville. Aboard this plane was Opry star Jim Reeves and his manager / band pianist, Dean Manuel. Reeves was behind the controls approaching Nashville when he entered a thunderstorm. It's believed that the storm disoriented him. He didn't really know where he was in the storm and ended up crashing the plane nose first into the ground. The nose of the plane actually had to be dug out of the ground from how fast the plane was going and just lawn darted into the earth. It would take search parties 2 days to actually find the crash, which leads us to this super weird little bit of history. The person who knew where the crash had happened, because they claimed to have seen the plane dip down from the clouds and hear the plane crash, was a local legend who had no problem finding other volunteers to look for the plane. It was country music star Marty Robbins, of all people. Like, I had to be someone, but it was Marty the big iron guy from the New Vegas. It was the New Vegas guy. I don't know why it was Marty Robbins, but every single account I've read is like, yeah, Marty Robbins witnessed the crash and immediately started gathering up search parties to go looking for it. On June 20th, 1965, Ira Lovin, mandolinist, singer, and half of the country music act known as the Lovin Brothers, was killed when his car was struck by a drunk driver. Ira himself was known as a notorious drunk with a short temper and a history of being an abusive husband. He'd been married 4 times, and his third wife had shot him multiple times in the chest after he had beaten her. Good for her. He somehow survived all these gunshots, but it's believed that these bullets had caused tissue damage, that when he was in the crash, it exacerbated it, causing him to bleed out super quickly. And when the police arrived at the scene of the crash, they looked at him and they're like, wow, we have a warrant out for whoever owns that car in relation to a DUI investigation. Like, lifelong drunk, wanted in connection to a DUI, gets killed by a drunk driver. How successful is the liquor store owner in this town? Because it just seems like everyone is driving under the influence here. And this last case is just senseless and tragic. On November 10th, 1973, the bodies of David Stringbane Aikman and his wife Estelle were found dead by fellow musician Louis Grandpa Jones. Aikman was a very well-known and respected banjo player and comedian. In fact, he was a cast member of Hee Haw and a member of the Grand Ole Opry. Aikman had grown up during the Great Depression and had a severe distrust of banks, and it was a very well-known local secret that he would regularly keep very large amounts of money on him and in his trailer. On November 10th, Aikman had performed at the Grand Ole Opry before returning to his home in Ridgetop, Tennessee, only about 20 miles north of Nashville. When him and his wife arrived home, they noticed 2 intruders ransacking their home. The intruders were cousins John and Marvin Brown, and they shot and killed both Aikman and Estelle before robbing them both and then stealing their car to flee. When the cousins were later caught, they still had over $5,700 in cash on them that they had stolen from Aikman and his wife. In just over 20 years, 10 performers with ties to the Grand Ole Opry that had performed at the Ryman Theater would perish. And there's a lot of accidents and other reports and some natural causes deaths that I did not include in this video. Like Texas Ruby's brother, Tex Owens, died of a heart attack about a year before she did. But I didn't include that because 1, he had stopped performing at the Opry to pursue a acting career, and 2, The dude was like 70 years old, okay? I don't think a curse is involved in a 70-year-old having a heart attack and dying. So what's the takeaway from this? Well, the world of country music has its own fascinating blend of folklore and superstitions and legends. It was actually kind of frustrating trying to research this video because so much about some of these cases have been embellished and glorified and talked up over the years that in some cases it was really hard getting down to the facts. But like all great stories, that's just what happens over time. And this is a chapter that has forever been cemented as part of not just Appalachian folklore, but also country music, urban legends in general, and that's fascinating. So if you've stuck around for this long, thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, share, do all that stuff. And I hope to talk to you again very soon. Don't forget to stay wild, stay wonderful, and I'll talk to you later.